They called him Mr. Mike, not Mr. Johnson, not Mr. Smith, just Mr. Mike. He swept the same high school halls where kids ignored him like he was furniture, pushed the same mop through puddles of soda and broken dreams. He was in his 40s now, still renting the same one-bedroom apartment with peeling paint, a heater that coughed all winter, and an air conditioner that did everything but cool. Mike didn't have a wife, didn't have kids, didn't have much. But he did have one thing: pain. And pain, that's hard to ignore. He came from a place where dreams were more like bedtime lies. His dad, tough, tired, and always angry, used to say, "People like us don't make it out. The system's rigged, so don't even try." And Mike believed him. He wasn't book smart, barely made it through high school. His teachers had called him a sweet kid with a bad memory. He'd call himself a nobody with no way out. Each morning, Mike would clock in before the sun rose, clean up bathrooms that smelled like defeat. Then, at lunch, he'd sit in the supply closet and eat his sandwich in silence. He didn't complain. That's just how life was. But that all changed the day he broke down. It was just another Thursday. Mike had just finished unclogging a cafeteria sink when he overheard a student laughing. Not cruelly, just casually, talking about his dreams, about going to college, starting a business, becoming the next big thing. Mike didn't even feel angry. He felt empty. That afternoon in the janitor's closet, he didn't eat. He just sat there staring at the cracked tile wall, thinking, what did I do wrong? Why is life always uphill for people like me? Maybe my dad was right. Maybe I was never meant for more. And for the first time in years, Mike cried, not just a tear. He sobbed quietly but deeply, like grief that had been locked away for decades finally found the key. What he didn't know was that someone had been watching. A man named Mr. Carter, a guest speaker who had just finished a school event, noticed Mike sitting there. He didn't say much at first, just sat down beside him a few feet apart and said, "You know, I used to clean buildings too." Mike wiped his face, embarrassed. "You? Yeah, right." But Mr. Carter didn't laugh. Instead, he reached into his leather bag and pulled out a book, worn, weathered, its pages soft at the corners. "Someone gave this to me when I needed it," he said. "Now I'm passing it on. No pressure. But if you're tired of being tired, give it a read." Mike looked at the cover. He'd never heard of it, but that was no surprise. He'd never read a full book by choice in his entire life. It wasn't flashy, no gold lettering, no promises of instant riches. Just a plain, old-school title and a quiet confidence that whispered, "There's more." He slipped it into his pocket, unsure if he'd even open it. But later that night, as the city went to sleep and Mike sat alone under a flickering kitchen light, he opened the first page. Mike didn't understand every word. The book was written in a style that felt old. Some of the terms made him reach for Google Translate. Others just made him pause and think. But what hit him deeply was the message. That thoughts were power. That belief could move mountains. That success wasn't born in bank accounts, but in the mind. He'd always thought his life was limited by the system, by racism, by poverty, by his own failures. But this book said, "You are not what happened to you. You are what you decide to become." And suddenly, that tiny spark of doubt, the one that always told him he'd never make it, felt less like truth and more like a habit. He couldn't put the book down. Page after page, it chipped away at every excuse he'd built to survive. He read about people who started with less than him and created something incredible, not because they were lucky, but because they made a decision and didn't back down. And slowly, an idea began to form. Something quiet, something fragile, but something new. What if I'm not broken? What if I'm just untrained? What if success isn't about being smart, but about being consistent? That weekend, instead of watching TV or sleeping in, Mike wrote 3 words on a sticky note and placed it on his bathroom mirror. "Why not me?" That was the moment the seed was planted. He didn't have a business plan. He didn't even own a laptop. But now, for the first time in his adult life, Mike had hope. Mike didn't have a garage like the legends of Silicon Valley. He had a broom closet, literally. At the back of the high school where he mopped floors and emptied trash cans, there was a tiny, musty supply room with one flickering bulb, a cracked linoleum floor, and just enough room for a chair and a fold-out tray. That became his office. Every lunch break, while teachers talked in the lounge and students laughed in the halls, Mike slipped away. Not to rest, but to build. He scribbled down business ideas in a $1 composition notebook, gardening tips, cleaning tricks, budget hacks, stories from the janitor's closet. The kids he once envied, tech whizzes and straight-A students, now passed him in the halls without realizing that behind that beat-up door, a vision was growing. At night in his crummy apartment, he borrowed his neighbor's Wi-Fi and watched YouTube tutorials, not on gaming or gossip, but on thumbnails, titles, storytelling. He couldn't afford fancy tools, so he filmed his first videos on a used iPhone, propped up with soup cans. His hands were calloused from work, but steady on camera. His voice, nervous, quiet, but honest. He shared what he knew: how to clean grout without chemicals, how to grow tomatoes in cracked plastic buckets, how to stay hopeful when the rent's late and the world calls you nothing. And slowly, people started watching. 10 views became 50. One stranger left a comment. "Bro, this hit me. I needed this today." Mike stared at that comment for 10 minutes straight. He took a screenshot and printed it, taped it to the wall of his office. He wasn't chasing likes. As a matter of fact, he got some thumbs down too, and a negative comment, which he chose to ignore. Because he was now chasing proof that maybe, just maybe, he had something worth sharing. Mike never told anyone at first, not his neighbors, not his co-workers, and definitely not his dad. He'd been mocked before for, dreaming too big. So this time, he kept his dreams quiet, just the late-night uploads, the broom closet edits, the YouTube studio screen that honestly became his best friend and greatest frustration. And then, one evening, everything changed. A tech-savvy teenager with bright eyes and quicker fingers caught him editing on his busted laptop during lunch. "Mike, is that you on YouTube?" He froze. But instead of laughing, she leaned in. "Your thumbnails suck," she said flatly. "But your ideas are awesome. My dad loves them." She showed him how to use free editing tools. She made him a Canva account. Within a week, Mike had already binge-watched every YouTube video that could help him learn to use Canva, fix his lighting, translate captions, and add music. Suddenly, it wasn't just Mike's project. It was a full-blown dream. Mike's crummy apartment turned into a buzzing idea lab. The living room became a studio. The hallway, a makeshift green screen. The kitchen counter, a tripod station. And the best part? He was laughing. These weren't just uploads, they were memories. They weren't just videos. They were roots, growing something bigger than he dared to believe. One month, the channel made $37, then $58, then one day, $280. He stared at the screen, blinking. That's when it hit him. This wasn't just a hobby, it was the beginning of freedom. It took years, not months, not weeks, years, of quiet work, of self-doubt, of going to bed exhausted from cleaning hallways only to wake up early and plan a thumbnail. Mike's channel didn't go viral overnight, but it never stopped growing. By the 4th year, it had 100,000 subscribers. By the 5th, he was making more from YouTube, digital products, and speaking gigs than he ever did as a janitor. He was invited to speak at a youth conference. He wore a borrowed suit, shaky hands, nervous heart. But when he stepped on stage and told his story, the room went silent. He told them the truth. "I was never smart in school. I was never told I could succeed. But I changed the way I thought, and that changed everything." And then he held up a book that a stranger once gave him while he was wiping tears off a mop handle. That book, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Napoleon Hill wasn't a financial guru or a flashy speaker. He was a journalist who spent over 20 years studying the most successful people in history, like Andrew Carnegie, Henry Ford, and Thomas Edison. What he discovered wasn't just about money. It was about the power of belief, the clarity of desire, and the discipline to take action even when no one is watching. Think and Grow Rich isn't a get-rich-quick book. It's a mindset blueprint, a guide for people who feel stuck, small, or forgotten, just like Mike did. These aren't just ideas. They're proven paths walked by people who started with less and built something more. Mike's life didn't change because someone handed him money. It changed because someone handed him a new way of thinking. He built a business, he rebuilt his confidence, he even found love with a fellow content creator he'd met through a comment thread. Now they run the business together, from janitor closets to podcast studios, from doubt to dignity. Mike didn't just think and grow rich, he thought and grew free. If Mike's story moved you, consider hitting that like button, subscribing, and dropping a comment. Every week, we share stories based on powerful books that transform lives. Not fluff, Not hype, just honest journeys from struggle to strength. And if you want to read the book that sparked Mike's journey, we've linked it below. No pressure, just possibilities that will help you grow financially and personally, one book at a time.